In a quiet mansion, a businessman in a wheelchair watches his life lose its shine. Everything changes when he meets a girl who, despite poverty and rain, offers hope with a simple look. This unlikely connection sparks a transformation that heals hearts and changes lives. Roderick Adams commanded his technology empire from the top floor of a glass skyscraper on Wall Street, the financial heart of New York City. At 42, he was the founder and CEO of TechBridge, one of the fastest-growing startups in the country, specializing in technological solutions for digital inclusion. With an engineering degree from MIT and an MBA from Stanford, Roderick had transformed a university project into a company valued at hundreds of millions of dollars. From his ergonomic Italian leather chair, he controlled his company with a maestro's precision. His minimalist office was decorated with Entrepreneur of the Year awards and international recognitions. The white walls displayed only abstract art, carefully selected by professional decorators. Everything there reflected power, success, and control. That Thursday, Roderick was closing yet another multi-million-dollar contract to expand his technology centers into the Midwest. The meeting with investors had been a success, and he was about to celebrate by taking his fiancée, Beatrice Miller, a financial market executive, to dinner at the city's best restaurant. His cell phone vibrated. It was Tony, his driver, notifying him that he was already waiting in the garage. Roderick went down the private elevator, exchanging messages with Beatrice to confirm the time. He didn't notice the puddle of water left by the cleaning staff as he hurriedly exited the elevator. A second of distraction was enough to change his life forever. 6 months later, Roderick Adams was no longer the same man. The slip had resulted in a fall that compromised his spinal cord, confining him to a wheelchair. Doctors were cautious about his chances of walking again. Intensive physical therapy consumed his mornings, but progress was minimal. His triplex penthouse on the Upper East Side, once the scene of sophisticated parties and dinners, had transformed into a silent prison. The white walls, the designer furniture, the expensive artwork, everything seemed devoid of meaning. Beatrice had taken a break from the relationship 2 months after the accident, citing work pressures. Roderick knew the truth. She wasn't prepared for a life alongside someone with physical limitations. The phone rang less often. Friends who once vied for his company now sent generic messages asking how he was, without really wanting to know the answer. His elderly parents, living in Ireland, could only offer support from afar. His 2 siblings, busy with their own families in other cities, called sporadically. At the company, his initial 3-month leave had extended. Although he maintained contact via video conferences and continued to make the most important decisions, Roderick had delegated some of his functions to Maurice Saunders, his vice president and college friend. In his rare appearances at the office, he noticed the pitying glances of the employees, and it infuriated him. "Mr. Adams, you have physical therapy in an hour," reminded Cecilia Dawson, his personal assistant, who now also coordinated his medical care and appointments. "Cancel it." "I'm not feeling well today," he replied curtly, without taking his eyes off the window overlooking Central Park. "But Dr. Thompson said consistency is crucial for your recovery, and this is the 3rd session you've cancelled this week. I said cancel it." He raised his voice, something that had become common in recent months. Seeing Cecilia's startled face, he sighed. "I'm sorry, Cecilia, just cancel it, please." When he was alone, Roderick wheeled his chair towards the bar, pouring himself an expensive whiskey. It was his 3rd of the day, and it wasn't even 2 in the afternoon. Alcohol had become a constant companion, numbing not the physical pain, but the one that consumed his soul, the feeling of being useless, dependent, less of a man. His routine had transformed into a monotonous cycle of medication, alcohol, remote work, sleepless nights, and a loneliness that no money could fill. Sometimes he would spend hours looking at photos from before the accident, Roderick skiing in the Alps, diving in the Maldives, climbing mountains in Chile. That man had disappeared. That night, against his doctors' and therapists' recommendations, Roderick decided to go to the office for a meeting with foreign investors. Maurice could have handled it, but a part of him still needed to prove, to himself and to others, that he was still in control. The rain was falling heavily over New York City when Tony parked at the entrance of the TechBridge building to pick him up after the meeting. It was almost 9 p.m., and the meeting had been a disaster. The investor's uncomfortable glances, the questions about his physical condition, the veiled doubts about his leadership ability, all of it had left him furious. Maurice had tried to mediate, but Roderick felt as if he was losing ground in his own company. "Home, sir?" Tony asked, helping him into the adapted SUV. "Yes," he replied sharply, avoiding eye contact. The car glided through the wet city streets, and Roderick watched the lights distorted by the water on the windows. It was then, at the intersection of Times Square and Broadway, that he saw a small figure rummaging through garbage bags piled on the sidewalk in front of an exquisite restaurant. Even in the heavy rain, the child, who seemed to be about 9 years old, methodically examined the contents of the bags. Something about that scene deeply bothered him. Tony stopped the car. "Sir?" "Stop the car, up ahead. I want to talk to that child." The driver obeyed, parking a few meters from the girl. Roderick lowered the window, feeling raindrops hit his face. "Hey, girl," he called out. "Come here." The girl looked suspicious but approached slowly, protecting something under her soaked t-shirt. "What are you doing out in the rain at this hour?" Roderick asked, his tone harsher than he intended. The girl, with curly hair plastered to her face by the water, large brown eyes and dark skin, stared at him fearlessly. "I'm working," she replied simply. "Working, rummaging through trash. I'm looking for good food they throw away. Today is a special offer day at this restaurant. There's always a lot left over," she explained naturally, as if it were completely normal. "My mum is sick and couldn't work today, so I came to help." That direct response, devoid of self-pity, disconcerted Roderick. "Shouldn't you be at school? Or at home, protected from the rain?" The girl smiled, revealing a missing front tooth. "I already went to school this morning, sir. And there's no food at home. The rain doesn't hurt, you know. My mum says it's just water falling from the sky." Roderick didn't know what to say. For the first time in months, something other than anger or self-pity touched him. "What's your name?" he asked, his tone now softer. Julia Nash. "And you, sir?" "Roderick Adams." The girl observed him carefully, noticing the wheelchair inside the car. "You can't walk, can you?" she asked with the sincerity only children possess. "No," he replied curtly, expecting the pitying glance everyone gave him, but Julia merely nodded thoughtfully. Then, to his complete surprise, she extended her small, grubby hand, offering him half of a sandwich wrapped in a napkin that she had rescued from the trash. "Want some?" "It's still good, they just threw it away because there was too much." Roderick looked at that outstretched hand, at the partially crushed sandwich, and something broke inside him. "No, thank you," he managed to say, his voice strangely choked. "You look sad," Julia said, tilting her head to the side. "Even sadder than Mrs. Carmen from apartment 302, who lost her parrot." An involuntary laugh escaped Roderick's lips. "And how do you know I'm sad?" "You can see it in your eyes," she replied simply. "My mom says eyes are the windows to the soul." The rain continued to fall, but neither Julia nor Roderick seemed to notice. "I can help you walk again, you know," she said suddenly. "How?" Roderick asked, confused. "Not with your legs, but with your heart. My mom says when we're sad we stop walking on the inside. And that's worse than not walking with your legs." If this story has interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching from. Continuing. That night marked Roderick in a way he couldn't explain. Lying in his king-size bed, with Egyptian cotton sheets, he couldn't get the image of Julia offering him half a sandwich found in the trash out of his head. The generosity of that gesture, coming from someone who had so little, contrasted painfully with his own emotional pettiness. Stopping walking on the inside is worse than not walking with your legs. The girl's phrase echoed in his mind like an unsettling mantra. Could a street child possess more wisdom than he, with all his elite education and life experience? After their conversation, he had given Julia $500, an amount that probably represented more than her mother earned in a month. The girl looked at the bills with astonishment, but showed neither the greed nor the excitement Roderick expected. Instead, she asked if she could keep only $200 and return the rest because it was too much money and she was afraid of losing it or getting robbed. This reaction left him perplexed. In his world, No one ever refused money, much less someone in need. In the end, he convinced Julia to keep it all, promising himself that this would be the end of the story. A good deed to compensate for his bad mood, nothing more. But the next morning, as he drank his coffee prepared by Mary, the housekeeper, Roderick found himself thinking about the girl again. Where would she be now? Had she managed to buy food for her sick mother? Was she at school? "Are you all right, sir?" Mary asked, noticing he had spent 10 minutes staring at the same page of the newspaper. "I am, Mary, just thoughtful." That day, surprisingly, Roderick didn't cancel his physical therapy. During the session with Dr. Paul, he pushed himself harder than in recent weeks, as if something had awakened a new determination in him. "What happened?" the physical therapist asked, noticing the change. "You seem different today." "I met someone who made me think," he replied vaguely. That evening, Roderick asked Tony to take him back to the place where they had found Julia. He wasn't sure what he was doing or why. Perhaps it was just curiosity, or perhaps an inexplicable need to confirm that the encounter had been real. The rain from that night had given way to a typical New York City drizzle. The driver parked exactly where they had stopped the day before, in front of the restaurant. Roderick waited, watching the sidewalk for almost an hour, but Julia didn't appear. "Do you want me to ask someone, sir?" Tony offered, intrigued by his boss's unusual behavior. "No, let's go," Roderick replied, suddenly feeling ridiculous. What was he thinking? That the girl would be in the same place, as if her life revolved around that spot. For the next 3 days, however, Roderick returned to the location, always at the same time. On the third night, when he had already decided that this would be his last attempt, he spotted Julia. She wasn't rummaging through the trash, but rather chatting animatedly with the doorman of a nearby building, a grey-haired gentleman who smiled at her story. "There she is," Roderick pointed, feeling an inexplicable relief. Tony stopped the car, and Roderick lowered the window, calling the girl. Julia, recognizing him, bid farewell to the doorman and ran to the vehicle, her face lighting up with a genuine smile. "Mr. Adams, you came back!" "Yes," he replied, surprised by his own action. "I wanted to know how you are." "And your mother, is she better?" "Yes, I used the money you gave me to buy her medicine and food for the whole week. I even saved a little for emergencies, as she taught me." Roderick nodded, admiring the girl's responsibility. "You're not?" "I'm working today?" he asked, referring to her search for food in the trash. Julia shook her head. "I don't need to anymore, now we have food at home. I just came to thank Mr. Sebastian," she pointed to the doorman, "because he always set aside good things for me on the days I came here." Something in Roderick's chest tightened. The girl had a support network. Ordinary people, workers who did what they could to help her. Meanwhile, he, with all his resources, lived isolated in his bitterness. Would you like to get some ice cream?" he asked impulsively, pointing to an ice cream parlor across the street. Julia's eyes widened. "Can I really? I've only had ice cream twice in my life." This simple confession hit Roderick like a punch. How many times had he ignored desserts in Michelin-starred restaurants for being below standard? "Of course you can. Tony, could you take Julia there and buy her whatever she wants?" "Unfortunately, I can't easily get out here." "No," Julia protested. "I want you to come too. That ice cream parlor has a ramp. I've seen wheelchairs go in there." Roderick hesitated. Since the accident, he had avoided appearing in public as much as possible, hating the pitying glances and the feeling of helplessness when navigating spaces not fully adapted. "Please?" Julia insisted, her eyes pleading. "You said you would help me walk on the inside, remember?" "Actually, you were the one who offered to help me," Roderick corrected, unable to suppress a smile. "Then we're helping each other." 20 minutes later, to Tony's astonishment, Roderick was sitting at a table in the ice cream parlor, watching Julia devour a banana split with the enthusiasm only children possess. He himself had ordered a pistachio ice cream, his childhood favorite, which he hadn't eaten in years. Between spoonfuls, Julia told him about her life. She lived with her mother, Helen, in a small apartment in the south side of Chicago housing project. Helen worked as a housekeeper in family homes and made cakes to sell on weekends. She had dropped out of school when she became pregnant with Julia at 22, and the girl's father never acknowledged paternity. "But my mom is very smart," Julia said proudly. She reads many books she borrows from the library, and she's taking an online business administration course. She says one day she'll have her own business. And you, do you like school? Roderick asked, genuinely interested. I love it, especially math and science. My teacher says I'm gifted, she replied without any trace of vanity, as if commenting on the weather. I want to be a scientist when I grow up, to invent things that help people, or maybe a doctor to cure everyone. Roderick watched her, amazed by her intelligence and optimism, despite the difficult circumstances. Your mother must be very proud of you. Yes, but she always says that the important thing is not to be smart, but to be a good person. At that moment, a woman rushed into the ice cream parlor, her face etched with worry. Upon seeing Julia, her expression turned to relief, immediately followed by a severe look. Julia Nash! Do you have any idea how much you scared me? I went to pick you up at Mrs. Zola's house, and she said you had left over an hour ago. Mom! The girl exclaimed, jumping from her chair. Sorry, I met Mr. Adams and we came for ice cream. Look, he's that man I told you about, the one in the wheelchair who gave me the money. Helen, a woman in her 30s with curly hair tied in a simple bun, modest but impeccably clean clothes, looked at Roderick with a mixture of suspicion and gratitude. You're Roderick? Thank you very much for the help you gave my daughter, but I must say it's not appropriate to take a child you barely know anywhere without parental permission. Roderick felt his face burn with shame. She was absolutely right. Ma'am, I apologize profusely. It was impulsive and thoughtless on my part. You are absolutely right. Helen, who clearly expected a defensive reaction, seemed surprised by his admission of error. Well, I appreciate your honesty, and I also thank you for the financial help. I was able to buy the medicine I needed and pay my bills. Mom, Mr. Adams owns a big company, Julia interrupted. He works with computers and technology. Helen cast a curious glance at Roderick, noticing his expensive watch and the luxury car parked in front of the ice cream parlor, with the driver waiting. Really? And what brings you to this part of town, sir? Adams, Roderick Adams, he replied, extending his hand. And honestly, it was your daughter who brought me here. I met Julia a few days ago when she... He hesitated, unsure how to describe the situation without embarrassing them. When I was getting food from the restaurant's trash, Julia completed without embarrassment. That was before the money, Mom. Helen's face flushed intensely. Julia, I told you never to do that. We may not have much, but we have our dignity. But, Mom, you were sick, unable to work, and the food was going to be thrown away anyway. Roderick intervened, sensing the mother's distress. Miss Helen, your daughter is extraordinary. Her intelligence, her maturity. She impressed me greatly. Helen softened her expression, stroking her daughter's hair. She is my treasure. Everything I do is for her. At that moment, Roderick made a decision that would change the course of 3 lives. Miss Helen, I know this might seem strange coming from a near stranger, but I would like to invite both of you to visit my company. I have some social projects for digital inclusion that might benefit Julia. And who knows, we might have some professional opportunity that matches your skills and aspirations. Helen studied him for a long time, as if trying to decipher his true intentions. Why would you do that for us? She asked directly. Roderick looked at Julia, who was watching the conversation with attentive eyes and then at his own immobile legs. The truth escaped before he could censor it. Because your daughter offered me half a sandwich when she herself was hungry, because she saw beyond my wheelchair and saw my sadness, and because in 5 minutes of conversation, she gave me more hope than all the doctors and therapists in the last 6 months. Helen looked at her daughter with a mixture of pride and perplexity, then turned back to Roderick. You seem sincere, and Julia has a good instinct for people. But I need to think about it. Could you give me your card? I promise to get in touch. Roderick nodded, handing her his business card. As the two prepared to leave, Julia approached him and, to his surprise, hugged him. Thank you for the ice cream, Mr. Adams, and don't forget to do the exercise I taught you. Exercise? Yes, looking at the sky and finding shapes in the clouds. It makes us walk on the inside. As he watched mother and daughter walk away hand in hand down the sidewalk, Roderick felt something awaken in his chest, an almost forgotten sensation, like a long unused muscle beginning to reactivate. That night, for the first time in months, he went to the balcony of his penthouse and looked at the sky. Among the light pollution of New York City, few stars were visible, but he watched them anyway, looking for patterns, as Julia had suggested. And for a brief moment, Roderick Adams forgot that he couldn't walk. 2 weeks passed without Roderick hearing from Helen. He had resumed his routine, but something had changed. He attended physical therapy sessions without complaining, began to reduce his alcohol consumption, and returned to participating more actively in the company, connecting via video conference when he couldn't go in person. Cecilia, his assistant, was the first to notice the change. "You seem better, more present," she commented while organizing his schedule. Roderick merely nodded, unsure how to explain that the encounter with a 9-year-old child had affected him so much. In fact, he himself didn't fully understand it. He only knew that Julia's simplicity and wisdom had awakened something he thought was lost. In the 3rd week after the ice cream parlor encounter, Roderick was in his office at Techbridge when Cecilia rushed in. "Mr. Adams, there's a lady named Helen Nash at the reception. She said you invited her to visit the company." Roderick felt a wave of excitement he hadn't experienced in months. "Yes. Please ask Tony to bring them up here." "She's alone, sir. She said her daughter is at school." Minutes later, Helen entered the spacious office on the top floor of the building. She wore a simple white blouse, jeans, and flat shoes. Her hair was loose, forming curls that framed her delicate face. She seemed nervous but maintained a dignified posture. "Miss Helen, it's good to see you again." Roderick approached in his wheelchair, extending his hand. "Please sit down." "Thank you for receiving me, Mr. Adams," she replied formally, sitting in the indicated armchair. "I apologize for the delay in responding to your invitation. I needed to reorganize my work schedule." "I understand perfectly. I'm glad you came. How is Julia?" Helen's face lit up when speaking of her daughter. "She's well. In fact, she hasn't stopped talking about you. She's been asking me every day when we'll visit your company." Roderick smiled, feeling a strange satisfaction. "She's an extraordinary child." "She is," Helen agreed, her gaze becoming more direct. "And that's why I'm here, Mr. Adams. I need to understand exactly what you want from us." The frankness of the question surprised Roderick, but he appreciated her honesty. "Ms. Helen, I understand your distrust. In your place, I would also question the intentions of a stranger who suddenly takes an interest in my family. But I assure you there are no ulterior motives. Your daughter, she helped me in a difficult time without even knowing it." Helen studied him for a few seconds, as if evaluating the sincerity of his words. "Julia has that gift. She always sees the best in people, even when they can't see it themselves." "Exactly," Roderick agreed. "And as for my proposal, it's genuine. Our company has a digital inclusion program that brings technology and education to underserved communities. Julia could benefit from that, and if I may be frank, I believe someone with your level of determination and responsibility would be a great asset to our team." "Mr. Adams, I appreciate the offer, but I'm not qualified to work in a technology company. I'm a housekeeper, and I make cakes to supplement my income. I didn't finish college. Ms. Helen, our social division doesn't need technology specialists. It needs people who understand the real needs of the communities we want to help. Someone like you who lives that reality would have much more valuable insights than any consultant with an MBA." Helen seemed surprised by the proposal, but still hesitant. "What kind of work would it be?" "Initially a consulting position in the development of social projects. You would help us identify real needs and adapt our solutions so they truly work in contexts like your neighborhood." Helen bit her lip, thoughtful. "And what would be the compensation?" "Compatible with the role, with all the benefits our employees receive, health insurance, meal vouchers, profit sharing, and flexible hours that allow you to continue your online studies." Helen's eyes widened slightly, revealing that the amount was far above what she was used to receiving. "Mr. Adams, I am grateful for the offer, but I don't accept charity. And I'm not offering charity. Miss Helen, I'm offering a mutually beneficial business opportunity. You bring us a unique perspective that we lack, and in return you receive fair compensation for your work and expertise." Helen reflected for a few moments. "With one condition," she said finally. "I want to be evaluated by the same criteria as any other employee. If I don't meet expectations, I want to be dismissed as anyone else would be." Roderick felt a wave of respect for that woman. Agreed. When could you start? I have commitments with families I work for. I would need 2 weeks to organize myself. Perfect. And what about Julia? Helen's face softened. She'll love visiting your company. Maybe next weekend? That's when she doesn't have school. After settling the details, Roderick called Cecilia to show Helen around and introduce her to some team members, including Carla Miller, Director of Social Projects. When he was alone, Roderick felt a satisfaction he hadn't experienced in a long time. Something about Helen intrigued him. Her dignity, her quiet strength, her determination to ensure the best for her daughter, despite all the difficulties. She was the opposite of so many people he knew in his social circle, who cared only about appearances and status. The following Saturday, as agreed, Helen brought Julia to visit Techbridge. Roderick had made sure to be present, despite rarely going to the office on weekends since the accident. The girl's face upon entering the modern building was a study in pure fascination. Her eyes scanned every detail, from the glass walls to the solar panels, from the state-of-the-art equipment to the creative common areas. "Is all this yours, Mr. Adams?" she asked, amazed. "It belongs to the company, Julia. Many people helped build all this. It's beautiful. It looks like the future, like in the movies." During the visit, Roderick presented the Social Innovation Area, where projects like educational tablets for public schools and microcredit apps for small entrepreneurs were developed. "And this is our latest project," he explained, showing a prototype of a digital community center. "We want to install these centers in underserved communities, offering access to computers, internet, programming courses, and digital entrepreneurship. That would help a lot of people in my neighborhood," Julia exclaimed. "Most of my friends don't have computers at home, and the internet cafe is too expensive. Exactly why your mother will be so important to us. She will help us understand what really works for people like you and your friends." Helen, who observed the interaction between her daughter and Roderick, seemed simultaneously grateful and apprehensive. It was evident that she worried about the influence this new world might have on Julia. During lunch in the company cafeteria, a modern space with organic and healthy options, Julia surprised everyone with her insight and imagination. "What if the digital center also had a toy library?" she suggested while eating her pasta. "Many children don't have cool toys at home, and playing is also important for learning, isn't it?" Carla Miller, the Director of Social Projects, looked impressed at the girl. "That's a brilliant idea. Julia, we never thought of that. And it could also have a space for mothers to leave their young children while they use the computers," she continued excitedly. "Like a daycare, but with educational activities. My friend Tati can't take the manicure course because she has no one to leave her little brother with." Roderick and Carla exchanged meaningful glances. Those simple yet deeply insightful suggestions revealed gaps that their expensive consultants had never identified. After lunch, while Carla showed Helen more details about the project she would be working on, Roderick took Julia to visit the Innovation Lab, where prototypes of educational gadgets were being developed. "What's that?" the girl asked, pointing to a device that looked like a bracelet. "It's a prototype of a health monitor for the elderly. It measures heart rate, blood pressure, and can automatically call for help in an emergency." Julia carefully picked up the device, examining it with genuine interest. "My grandma needed one of these. She lives alone in the countryside and my mum always worries." As they talked, Maurice Saunders, the vice president, entered the lab. Seeing Roderick with Julia, his face registered surprise. "Roderick, I didn't expect to see you here on Saturday. And who is this young lady?" "Maurice, this is Julia Nash. Julia, this is Maurice Saunders, vice president of Techbridge." Julia extended her hand politely. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Saunders. Your company is amazing." Maurice shook the girl's hand with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Thank you, dear. And what brings you here today? Are you an employee's daughter?" "My mom is going to start working here," she replied proudly. "She's going to help with the social projects." Maurice cast a questioning look at Roderick. "Helen Nash," Roderick clarified. "We just hired her as a consultant for the Digital Community Centers project." "Interesting," Maurice commented, his tone indicating the opposite. "I didn't know we were hiring for that area. I thought the budget was frozen until next quarter." It was a recent decision. Helen brings a unique perspective we needed. Maurice nodded, but Roderick knew that look. His vice president was not pleased about not being consulted. Well, I need to take care of some loose ends. It was a pleasure meeting you, Julia. Roderick, can we talk later? When Maurice left, Julia looked at Roderick with a worried expression. I don't think he liked me. It's not that, Julia. Maurice is just surprised by the changes. He's been my friend for many years and has always helped me run the company, especially since I became like this. Julia observed him carefully, her childlike intuition picking up nuances that many adults wouldn't notice. He doesn't look happy that you're better, she commented simply. His eye changed when you smiled. Roderick was caught off guard by the insightful observation. Indeed, in the past few weeks, as he had more actively resumed control of the company, he had noticed some resistance from Maurice. He had attributed it to normal adjustments in professional dynamics, but perhaps there was something more. At the end of the visit, Helen and Julia said goodbye, promising to return the following Monday for Helen's first official day. As he watched the company car take them back home, a benefit he had insisted on offering, Roderick reflected on how that casual encounter with a child in the rain was changing his life in ways he could never have predicted. That night, for the first time since the accident, Roderick fell asleep without the aid of medication or alcohol, lulled by an almost forgotten sensation, hope. Helen's first day at TechBridge was marked by curious glances and whispered conversations in the corridors. It wasn't common to see someone without a university degree or corporate experience being hired for a consulting position. Wearing a simple white shirt and dress pants, new clothes bought especially for the occasion, Helen walked through the glass corridors with a mixture of determination and apprehension. Carla Miller, Director of Social Projects, did her best to integrate her into the team, introducing her as an expert in the real needs of communities. Even so, Helen felt the weight of evaluative glances, especially from older executives. Don't worry about them, Carla reassured her during coffee break. They're used to consultants with ties and MBAs. They'll change their minds when they see your work. The first week was challenging. Helen had to absorb a lot of technical information about ongoing projects, learn corporate acronyms, and adapt to the fast pace of a large company. But she also brought something the team didn't expect, practical perspectives that no market study could offer. During a meeting about the design of the digital community centers, when an architect presented a minimalist concept all in glass and steel, Helen timidly raised her hand. Excuse me, but structures like that wouldn't last a week in the south side of Chicago. What do you mean? The architect asked, surprised. Glass is the first target for vandalism, besides not offering security, and these Scandinavian design chairs are pretty, but not practical at all for small children or the elderly. An uncomfortable silence filled the room. Helen feared she had said too much, but Carla encouraged her to continue. What would you suggest, Helen? Resistant materials like concrete and metal, but with vibrant colors and murals made by the community itself to create a sense of belonging. Functional furniture that can be easily reconfigured for different activities. And it would be important to have a safe outdoor area, because many mothers don't leave their children in completely enclosed places. The architect seemed offended, but several team members began taking notes. That was the first of many moments when Helen demonstrated her unique value to the company. Meanwhile, Roderick was gradually resuming his leadership position at TechBridge. Visits to the office became more frequent, and he returned to actively participate in strategic meetings. His transformation was visible, not just in his more upright posture in the wheelchair, but mainly in his renewed gaze and the energy that emanated from his words. In the third week after Helen's hiring, Roderick invited her, along with Carla, to present the project's progress to potential investors. It was a rare opportunity for someone so new to the company, and Helen was extremely nervous. I don't know if I'm ready for this, Mr. Adams, she confessed when he informed her about the presentation. You are more ready than any of us, Roderick assured her. These investors want real results, not pretty slides. Your authenticity will be our greatest asset. The presentation was a surprising success. While Carla explained the technical aspects of the project, Helen complemented with concrete examples of how each functionality would positively impact people's lives. Her simple speech, yet loaded with practical knowledge, captivated investors in a way that sophisticated presentations rarely could. "This woman is a find." "Roderick," one of the investors commented after the meeting, "where did you get her?" "Let's say it was a stroke of destiny," Roderick replied with an enigmatic smile. Not everything, however, was running so harmoniously. Maurice Saunders watched with growing discomfort the closeness between Roderick and Helen, as well as the positive impact she was having on the company, and especially on Roderick himself. During the months Roderick was more withdrawn, dealing with his new condition, Maurice had gradually assumed more power and autonomy. He had made important decisions, redirected investments, and established new strategic alliances. Roderick's return to full command threatened this new balance of power. On a Friday, after a board meeting where Roderick announced the expansion of the Digital Centers project, now renamed Digital Roots, at Helen's suggestion, Maurice confronted him in his office. "We are investing a lot in social projects." "Roderick," he said bluntly, "shareholders are concerned about the impact on quarterly profit." "The same shareholders who applauded the project at today's meeting?" Roderick questioned, raising an eyebrow. "They like the positive publicity, of course, but the numbers need to add up, and they will. Studies show that companies with strong social responsibility perform better in the long term." Maurice adjusted his tie, visibly uncomfortable. "It's not just that, Roderick. I'm worried about you." "About me?" "Yes, ever since you met this family, you've changed. You're making hasty, emotional decisions. This woman isn't qualified for the position she holds, and you're allowing her daughter to circulate through the company as if she were a mascot." Roderick felt his face flush. It was true that Julia, with school permission and always accompanied by Helen, occasionally visited the company after classes. And it was also true that these visits were the highlights of his weeks. Helen is proving her worth every day. And as for Julia, her ideas have already saved us months of market research. Roderick, we've been friends for years. I'm saying this for your own good. People are talking. Talking about what exactly? Maurice hesitated, choosing his words carefully. That you're emotionally involved. That you're trying to buy a family with a position in the company. Roderick remained silent for a few seconds, processing the veiled accusation. "Are you suggesting that I hired Helen for personal reasons?" "I'm saying that your situation since the accident has been difficult. It's understandable to seek connections, to feel useful, admired. That girl looks at you as if you were a hero. And her mother. Well, who wouldn't be grateful for a job that pays 10 times more than she would ever earn as a housekeeper?" Roderick turned his chair, facing the window, so Maurice wouldn't see the pain on his face. There was a seed of truth in those words that hit him deeply. He really did feel better with Julia's admiration, with Helen's gratitude and respect. But reducing everything to that was a cruel simplification. "I appreciate your concern, Maurice," he said finally, his voice controlled. "But I trust my judgment. Helen is doing an exceptional job, and the Digital Roots project will be a strategic differentiator for TechBridge in the coming years." Maurice sighed, momentarily defeated. "As you wish. It's your company, after all." When Maurice left, Roderick remained motionless, contemplating the city below. His vice president's words had planted a doubt in his mind. Was he really using his power and money to buy Helen and Julia's affection and admiration? That same afternoon, as if the universe wanted to test his convictions, an incident occurred that would definitively change the course of events. Julia had come to the company after school to show Helen an award she had received for a science project. While waiting for her mother to finish a meeting, the girl was quietly drawing in the creativity room, a colorful space with art supplies that Roderick had implemented after one of her suggestions. Maurice, who was passing by with a group of potential clients, saw the girl and entered the room with a displeased expression. "What are you doing here alone?" he asked in a dry tone. "I'm waiting for my mum, Mr. Saunders," Julia replied politely, though a little intimidated by his expression. "She's in a meeting with Carla." "This is no place for children," he said, looking at the curious clients. "We don't have a daycare here." Julia lowered her eyes, embarrassed. "Sorry, sir. Mr. Adams said I could stay here when I came to visit." The mention of Roderick seemed to irritate Maurice even more. Of course he did, he replied sarcastically. Then, turning to the clients, he added in a supposedly jocular tone, "Our new diversity policy even includes street children now." The silence that followed was glacial. The client seemed extremely uncomfortable, and Julia, though not fully understanding the malice behind the comment, felt the impact of the humiliation. What Maurice didn't realize was that Roderick, returning from an external engagement, had stopped in the corridor near the open door and heard everything. His face pale with fury, he entered the room, propelling his chair with force. "I apologize for the interruption, gentlemen," he said to the clients in a controlled tone. "Maurice, I need to speak with you immediately in private." In the office, with the door closed, Roderick did not contain his indignation. How could you speak to a child like that? Street child. Is that what you think of the social project we are developing? Roderick, it was just an unfortunate comment. I'm stressed with the quarter closing and... No, Maurice. That was not an unfortunate comment. It was prejudiced, cruel, and completely contrary to the values of this company. Values that I established 10 years ago and that you have apparently forgotten. Let's keep perspective here, Maurice tried to argue. The girl didn't even understand what I meant. And frankly, she shouldn't be here alone. This is a company, not a playground. Julia is not just any child, Maurice. She is exceptionally intelligent and sensitive. And even if she wasn't, she deserves to be treated with dignity. As for her being here, it was my idea. I invited her. Maurice crossed his arms, defensive. There's the problem, Roderick. Ever since you met this family, you've been making decisions based on emotions, not business. First you hire the unqualified mother, then you turn the company into a playground for the daughter. Roderick took a deep breath, trying to control his anger. Helen has proven more valuable to the project than consultants with 3 postgraduate degrees. And as for Julia, her occasional visits bring a perspective none of us could. Or do you think it's a coincidence that the Digital Roots project has gained so much traction after they arrived? The project gained traction because we injected money and resources into it, not because of a housekeeper and her daughter. Maurice exclaimed. Roderick stared at him, a decision crystallizing in his mind. You are suspended, Maurice. 2 weeks. Use that time to reflect on whether you still share this company's vision. You can't be serious, Maurice stammered, paling. I've never been more serious. And when you come back, I want you to apologize to Julia. And to Helen, too. This is absurd. I'll talk to the board. Talk. I'm the majority shareholder, remember? The final decision is mine. When Maurice slammed the door shut, Roderick felt a mixture of sadness and determination. He and Maurice had built TechBridge together, faced countless challenges side by side. But something had changed. Perhaps Roderick's accident, perhaps the temporary power Maurice had experienced, or perhaps simply worldviews that were revealing themselves to be fundamentally different. Roderick went looking for Julia and Helen, determined to repair any damage Maurice's behavior might have caused. He found the girl still in the creativity room, but now with Carla by her side trying to cheer her up. Where's Helen? Roderick asked, noticing Julia's tear-filled eyes. She went to get her things, Carla replied with a worried expression. She said she's not working here anymore. Roderick found Helen in the parking lot, putting a small box with her belongings into the car the company provided for her transportation. Helen, please don't leave, he pleaded, approaching quickly in his wheelchair. She turned, her eyes moist but her chin held high in dignity. Mr. Adams, I appreciate the opportunity you gave me, but I cannot continue. I will not expose my daughter to this kind of humiliation. What Maurice did was unacceptable. He is suspended and will have to apologize to both of you when he returns. Helen shook her head. It's not just him. I noticed how many people look at me, what they whisper when I pass by. I know I don't have the traditional qualifications to be here, but you have something much more valuable, real knowledge about the people we want to help. Please, Helen, don't throw away everything we've built because of a prejudiced idiot. Helen hesitated, conflict evident on her face. It's hard to continue when I feel like we're only here out of charity. The word hit Roderick like a blow, painfully echoing Maurice's accusations. It's not charity, he stated with conviction. It's recognition of value. The Digital Roots project is taking shape thanks to your contributions. No one else could give us the perspective you brought. Helen studied him for a moment, searching for signs of sincerity. And what about Julia? I promised her no one would make her feel inferior again. I have a proposal, Roderick said, an idea forming as he spoke. Let's formalize her participation in the project. Not just as an occasional visitor, but as an official junior consultant. With a badge and everything. Junior consultant? Helen repeated between skeptical and surprised. Exactly. Her ideas have already shaped several aspects of the project. Why not officially recognize her contribution? Of course, with limited hours so it doesn't interfere with her studies. What do you think? A small smile began to form on Helen's lips. She would choose the title. Probably something like Child Happiness Specialist. Roderick laughed, relieved to see the tension dissipating. Perfect, and I'll be pleased to officially announce her appointment at the next team meeting. With some conditions, Helen added, regaining her seriousness. Julia only comes to the company under my supervision. Her studies will always be a priority, and everyone will treat her with the same respect they would treat any adult employee. Agreed, Roderick immediately concurred. Helen placed the box back on the floor and sighed. I'll stay. Not for myself, but because I believe in this project, and because Julia would be devastated if we had to distance ourselves from you. That last sentence hung in the air between them, laden with meanings neither of them was ready to fully explore. In the following weeks, TechBridge underwent a transformation that went beyond corporate policies or developing projects. It was a change in the very culture of the company. The first visible sign was the office decor. The previously white and minimalist walls began to gain color. In the reception area, a community mural was installed, where employees and visitors could leave messages and drawings. The initiative had come from Julia, of course, who inaugurated the space with a colorful drawing of people of all sizes around a digital tree. The cafeteria, formerly with its austere design, gained communal tables and a vertical garden, where fresh herbs were grown for use in the kitchen. Again, Julia's idea, enthusiastically implemented by the maintenance staff. More importantly, the Digital Roots project evolved rapidly. The prototype of the first digital community center was ready to be installed in the south side of Chicago, and 5 other locations had been mapped for initial expansion. Helen now led a small team dedicated to mapping community needs, and her confidence grew with each successful presentation. As for Julia, she took her role as Child Happiness Specialist very seriously. With an official badge and a small desk in the creativity room, she spent a few hours a week helping the team adapt interfaces and content for children. Her idea notebook had become a corporate treasure, frequently consulted by designers and developers. The most notable transformation, however, was happening within Roderick. His physical therapy sessions began to show results, small but significant. He could now stand with support for brief periods, and doctors were cautiously optimistic about the possibility of him taking a few steps with the aid of crutches. But the true change was internal. Bitterness had given way to a renewed purpose, and loneliness had been replaced by a genuine connection with the people around him, especially with Helen and Julia. Over time, his visits to the modest Nash home in the south side of Chicago became frequent. Initially, they were work meetings to discuss the project, but they soon transformed into dinners, where Helen prepared simple but delicious dishes, and Julia entertained everyone with school stories and wild ideas to improve the world. Roderick discovered that he felt more at ease in that small room, with simple furniture and walls decorated with Julia's drawings, than in his own luxurious and empty penthouse. There he wasn't the businessman in a wheelchair, the frustrated ex-athlete, or the man abandoned by his fiancée. He was just Roderick, someone who was valued for what he had to offer beyond money or status. One evening, after a particularly pleasant dinner, when Julia had already fallen asleep, Roderick and Helen were talking on the small apartment balcony, sharing a bottle of cheap wine he had brought. "Do you know what Julia told me today?" Helen commented with a smile. "That you're walking on the inside again." Roderick laughed, remembering that first conversation in the rain. "Your daughter is truly amazing." "Yes, she is," Helen agreed proudly. "And she's right about you. Ever since I met you in that ice cream parlor, you've changed so much. You're more alive." "You too saved me," Roderick admitted, his voice softer. "Before I met you, I merely existed. Now I feel like I'm living again." Helen averted her gaze, suddenly aware of the intensity of the moment. Roderick, we need to be careful. About what? About this, she gestured vaguely between them. You are my boss. I have a daughter to raise, and our lives are very different. Are they really? He questioned gently. Because in recent months, I've discovered that what truly matters is the same for both of us. Connection, purpose, making a difference. Helen remained silent, as if weighing her next words carefully. I'm scared, she finally confessed. Scared that one day you'll realize we're just a charity project, a way for you to feel better about yourself. That when you're fully recovered, emotionally and perhaps even physically, you won't see us the same way. The honesty of her confession touched Roderick deeply. Instead of being offended, he felt a wave of admiration for that woman who had the courage to expose her vulnerabilities. Helen, I was empty before the accident. I had success, money, a beautiful fiancée, but it was all superficial. The accident merely exposed the emptiness that already existed. He took her hand, noticing the difference between his soft skin and the calluses on Helen's palms, marks of a life of hard work. You are not a charity project. You are my daily reminder of what truly matters. That I can contribute to the world even without being able to run or climb mountains. Helen's eyes shone in the dim light of the balcony. We're also afraid of losing you, she confessed. Julia never had a father figure, and you. I would love to be that figure for her, Roderick completed, his heart racing. And much more than just a boss or friend to you, if you'll allow me. The moment was interrupted by Roderick's cell phone ringing. It was Tony, notifying him that he was waiting to take him back. I have to go, he said reluctantly. But this conversation isn't over. The next day, an important decision was made. The Digital Roots project would be renamed Digital Sunflowers. The idea came from Julia, of course, inspired by her favorite flower. Sunflowers always seek the sun, even on cloudy days, she explained during the team meeting. That's how our technology should be, helping people find light and growth no matter what their reality. The team enthusiastically applauded the project's new identity, and the design department immediately began working on a new logo, a sunflower, whose petals were formed by binary code. 2 weeks later, Morris returned from his suspension. To Roderick's surprise, he seemed genuinely remorseful. In a private conversation, he admitted that he had been consumed by the fear of losing his position in the company. When you withdrew, after the accident, I took on responsibilities I never thought I would have, he explained. Then when you started to come back with new ideas and different priorities, I felt threatened. I understand that, Morris, but we need to be aligned on what this company represents. And we are, the vice president assured him. Your accident made me realize how life can change in an instant. We need to leave a legacy greater than just quarterly profits. The sincerity in his words positively surprised Roderick. The next day, Maurice personally sought out Helen and Julia, offering sincere apologies for the incident. For Helen, he presented a detailed plan of how the finance department could support the Digital Sunflowers project with additional resources. For Julia, he brought a professional drawing kit and the promise that her ideas would always be heard with respect. Over time, even Maurice was won over by Julia's contagious enthusiasm and Helen's efficient pragmatism. The team's initial resistance transformed into admiration as the project took shape and gained external recognition. At home, Roderick also implemented changes. His penthouse, once a cold and impersonal space, began to come alive. The white walls received warm colors, the modern furniture was replaced by more comfortable pieces, and the balcony, previously underutilized, transformed into a small garden, where he, inspired by Julia, tried to cultivate sunflowers in large pots. One Sunday afternoon, he invited Helen and Julia for lunch at his home, the first time he had hosted them there. He watched anxiously as they explored the space, fearing that the obvious luxury would create a barrier between them. Your house. "There's beautiful," Julia exclaimed, running to the balcony to admire the sunflowers at different stages of growth. "Did you plant all these?" "I tried," Roderick admitted with a smile. "Some didn't survive my inexperience, but I'm learning." Helen watched silently, noticing the subtle transformations in the environment, The children's books on the shelf, the colourful cushions on the sofa, the picture frames with recent photos of the three of them at company events. It was as if the space was being prepared to receive more life, more human warmth. During lunch, prepared by a hired chef especially for the occasion, but following simple, homemade recipes at Roderick's insistence, the conversation flowed naturally, as it always did between them. Julia dominated much of the dialogue with school stories and curious questions about everything, from the panoramic elevator's operation to the details of the home automation system. After the meal, while Julia explored the library with permission to borrow any book she wished, Roderick and Helen remained alone on the balcony, resuming the conversation interrupted days earlier. "Helen, I've been thinking a lot about what we talked about," Roderick began. "About us." She nodded, her gaze fixed on the sunflowers swaying gently in the breeze. "Me too." "And I've come to a conclusion," he continued, gathering courage. "I don't want to be just your boss or friend or a father figure to Julia. I want more. I want to be a complete part of your lives." Helen turned to face him, her eyes revealing a mixture of hope and apprehension. "Roderick, it's not that simple. Our lives are very different." "They were," he corrected her. "But in recent months I've realized that what truly matters isn't where we live or how much money we have, but how we feel when we're together." Helen smiled softly, touched by the sincerity in his words. "And how do you feel?" "Complete," he replied without hesitation. "For the first time since, actually perhaps for the first time in my life." 6 months passed since that conversation on the balcony. The Digital Sunflowers project had become TechBridge's most successful initiative, with 5 community centers already operating in different underserved regions of New York City and plans for expansion to other major U.S. cities. The specialized press highlighted the project as an innovative model of technology with social impact, and investors vied for the opportunity to associate their brands with the initiative. The relationship between Roderick and Helen had evolved, naturally, as if both had finally found where they belonged. He had officially asked her to be his girlfriend during a simple dinner at home, with Julia as an enthusiastic accomplice who had helped prepare the surprise, decorating the room with sunflowers and lights. To avoid conflicts of interest in the company, Helen had been promoted to Director of Social Impact, reporting directly to the board and no longer to Roderick. Her team had grown, incorporating other residents from communities where the centers would be installed, creating a management model that valued local knowledge. Julia continued, as child happiness specialist, now leading a committee of children who tested the interfaces and content developed for the centers. Her academic performance, always excellent, had improved even further with access to educational resources she wouldn't have had before. Roderick had arranged a scholarship for her at one of New York City's best schools, where her talent was properly nurtured. As for Roderick, his physical recovery had surprised doctors. After intensive physical therapy sessions and experimental stem cell treatment, he could now take small steps with the aid of crutches. He wouldn't climb mountains again, as he had. Accepted, but the possibility of walking, even if limited, seemed a miracle unthinkable just a few months ago. The greater miracle, however, was his internal transformation. Bitterness and isolation had given way to deep gratitude and genuine connections. His penthouse, once a cold and solitary space, had transformed into a welcoming home where Helen and Julia spent increasingly more time. The white walls had been painted with warm colors, the designer furniture replaced by more comfortable pieces, and the balcony was now a verdant garden where sunflowers of different varieties bloomed in large pots. One Friday, after a long day, at work, Roderick surprised Helen with an unexpected proposal, that she and Julia move permanently into his penthouse. "You already spend more time here than at home," he argued with a smile, "and together we could create a true home, not just a place to live." Helen hesitated, worried about what others would think and the impact of the move on Julia's life. She asked for time to reflect and talk with her daughter. Julia's answer came the next day, when she arrived at the penthouse carrying a backpack full of her essential belongings, books, drawings, and her idea diary. "I've already decided we're moving here," she announced, with the direct simplicity that only children possess. Mom is worried about what people will say, but I told her people will always talk no matter what we do, so it's better to do what makes us happy. Roderick and Helen exchanged glances, both amused and surprised by the little one's wisdom. "And are you sure that would make you happy?" Helen asked cautiously. "Yes," Julia exclaimed without hesitation. "Here there's more space for my books, the garden for the sunflowers, and Roderick, our human." Sunflower. That unexpected definition deeply moved Roderick. Being compared to the flower that symbolized rebirth, and the constant search for light was more significant than any professional compliment he had ever received. A week later, the move was complete. The small apartment in the south side of Chicago, filled with memories and struggles, was carefully emptied. Helen made sure to donate most of the furniture to needy neighbors, taking with her only sentimental items: photographs, Julia's first framed drawing, the sewing machine that had belonged to her grandmother. The adaptation to the new life was not instantaneous. There were adjustments to be made, habits to reconcile, spaces to redefine. Helen insisted on contributing financially to the household expenses, proportionate to her income, to maintain her independence. Roderick respected her decision, although he made it clear it wasn't necessary. Julia was the quickest to adapt. She soon transformed the room Roderick had prepared for her into her own small universe, with bookshelves full of books, a desk for studies and projects, and walls decorated with her drawings and posters of female scientists she admired. The balcony became her gardening laboratory, where she cultivated not only sunflowers, but also vegetables and aromatic herbs under the guidance of Mary, the housekeeper who had now become almost a surrogate grandmother. A month after the move, Roderick prepared a special surprise. With Cecilia and Tony's help, he organized an intimate dinner for the three of them in the penthouse. The table was set on the balcony, among the sunflowers, with candles, flowers, and the best china. The menu, however, was simple: the feijoada that Helen had taught Roderick's private chef, following her grandmother's recipe. During dinner, with the city illuminated in the background, and Julia excitedly telling stories about her new science project at school, Roderick felt an absolute certainty this was his place in the world. Not in luxurious offices, not on international trips, not in the extreme sports he practiced before the accident, but there, with those two people who had entered his life by chance and transformed everything. When Julia finished eating and asked permission to go play with her new telescope, a gift from Roderick to encourage her interest in astronomy, he and Helen were left alone on the balcony. The moment seemed perfect for what he had planned. "Helen," he began, his voice slightly trembling, "these last few months have been the most significant of my life." She smiled, taking his hand across the table. "For me too. Sometimes I wonder how everything would have been if Julia hadn't rummaged in that trash on that specific rainy night." "I believe we would have found each other somehow," Roderick replied. "Some people are destined to cross our paths, no matter the circumstances." "You're getting philosophical," Helen joked. "Actually, I'm trying to gather courage for what I'm about to say." Roderick took a deep breath and, to Helen's surprise, leaned on the crutches he always kept nearby and stood up. With careful but determined movements, he took 2 steps towards her, and then knelt down with some difficulty. "Roderick," Helen exclaimed, alarmed. "Be careful with your back." "I'm fine," he assured her, smiling. "Some moments are worth the extra effort." From his pocket, he took out a small blue velvet box. "Helen Nash, you taught me the true meaning of strength, dignity, and love. Your daughter showed me how to walk on the inside again. You two are the home I always sought without knowing it. Will you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Silent tears streamed down Helen's face as she looked at the simple yet elegant ring in the box. A discreet solitaire, exactly as she had once mentioned she preferred, in a casual conversation that Roderick had clearly remembered. "Yes," she replied with a choked voice. "Yes, I accept." At that moment they heard a little shriek of joy. Julia was standing at the balcony door, hands covering her mouth, eyes sparkling with excitement. "I knew it. I knew he was going to ask. Mary told me he was preparing something special." Roderick laughed, still kneeling. "Come here, little spy. I need help getting up, and I also want to ask you an important question." Julia ran to help him, along with Helen. When Roderick was standing again, supported by his crutches, He looked seriously at the girl. "Julia, your mom agreed to marry me, but I need to know if you accept me as your father. Not to replace whoever came before, but to be by your side from now on, in every moment." The girl's eyes filled with tears, something rare for that always strong and positive child. "You're already my dad," she replied simply, hugging him tightly. "In my heart, which is where it really matters." 3 months later, the big day of the official launch of the Digital Sunflowers project for the press and investors had arrived. The event would be held at the largest and most successful community center. Located in the south side of Chicago, a symbolic choice Roderick had insisted on defending. The space, once an abandoned warehouse, had been completely renovated following the design proposed by Helen and perfected by the company's architects. Colorful walls decorated with local art, functional and cozy furniture, workstations adapted for different ages and needs, and a large community garden in the back, where, of course, sunflowers were cultivated alongside vegetables and medicinal plants. In its 2 months of operation, the center had already served over 1,000 families, offering everything from basic computer classes for seniors to advanced programming courses for young people. Local micro-entrepreneurs received support to digitize their businesses, and children had access to educational resources that would have been unthinkable before. For the event, the team had prepared a detailed presentation showing preliminary results and expansion plans. Roderick, however, had requested something special for the closing, a brief speech from Julia sharing her perspective on the project. When the big day arrived, media coverage exceeded expectations. Journalists from national and international outlets attended, drawn by the combination of cutting-edge technology, measurable social impact, and the inspiring personal story behind the project. Roderick opened the event with a speech unlike any he had given before. Instead of focusing on business metrics or return on investment, he spoke about personal transformation, purpose, and the importance of seeing beyond appearances. "A year ago, I was a bitter man, trapped not only in a wheelchair, but in a limited view of what success meant," he admitted sincerely. "It took a child's gaze to realize that I had stopped walking on the inside, something much more serious than losing physical mobility," he continued, explaining how the casual encounter with Julia and Helen had changed not only his personal life, but the entire strategic direction of TechBridge. "I discovered that true innovation doesn't just come from sophisticated laboratories or boardroom meetings. It comes from real contact with the people we want to impact, from the humility to recognize that those who live the challenges daily know more about their needs than any market study." Beside him, Helen, now officially his fiancée, listened with a mixture of pride and emotion. Her personal journey had been equally transformative, from a housekeeper and single mother struggling to survive to a respected director of a national impact initiative whose opinions were valued in board meetings and international conferences. When it was Julia's turn to speak, the audience was completely captivated. The girl, wearing a yellow jumpsuit she had chosen herself to look like a human sunflower, took the stage with surprising confidence for her newly turned 10 years old. "Good afternoon, everyone," she began in a clear voice. "My name is Julia Nash Adams, and I am the Child Happiness Specialist for the Digital Sunflowers Project." The audience smiled, charmed by her demeanor and articulation. "When I met Mr. Adams, who is now officially going to be my dad, but already is in my heart, and he was very sad. He had stopped walking not only with his legs, but especially on the inside." Julia paused, looking directly at Roderick with a smile. "I told him I could help him walk again, and he thought I was talking about physical therapy or some magic medicine. But I was talking about something much more important, finding reasons to keep going, even when it's hard." The simplicity and depth of her words created a reverent silence in the audience. "Sunflowers are my favorite flowers because, even on cloudy days, they always look for the sun. They can grow in difficult places and transform light into food. That's what we want to do with our digital centers, help people find light in difficult places and transform that light into good things for their lives." As she finished her speech, there was no one in the audience who wasn't visibly moved, even the most skeptical journalists and the most pragmatic investors. The event's coverage exceeded all expectations. In the following days, Reports highlighted not only the technological and social aspect of the project, but especially the human story behind it. How the improbable encounter between an entrepreneur and a child had sparked a transformation that now benefited thousands of people. The week after the event, Roderick, Helen, and Julia took a few days off to finally hold the wedding ceremony they had planned. They opted for something intimate, at a small ranch outside of Dallas. The only guests were close friends from the company, some of Helen's neighbors from the South Side, of Chicago who had become dear friends, and Roderick's parents, who had come specially from Ireland for the occasion. The decoration, of course, had sunflowers everywhere, cultivated on the ranch itself under Julia's careful supervision in the months prior. The girl played a prominent role in the ceremony, being responsible for carrying the rings and also for giving a small reading she had written herself. "Family isn't just about having the same blood," she read with an emotional voice. "Family is about who makes our heart grow and our eyes sparkle. It's who helps us find the sun even on rainy days, like sunflowers." After the ceremony, as evening began, Roderick and Helen found a moment of privacy in the garden, while the guests enjoyed the party. "Think about how it all started," Helen reflected, looking at Julia dancing happily with Roderick's grandparents, with my daughter rummaging through trash on a rainy night. "Perhaps the universe knew what it was doing," Roderick replied, holding her hand. "We needed to find each other to save each other. Do you believe that? In destiny, I believe that some people come into our lives to transform us completely. And it's up to us to recognize those encounters when they happen." Helen smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "How are your sunflowers on the balcony?" "Growing strong, just like the three of us." In the following weeks, the new family's life found its rhythm. Roderick continued to lead TechBridge, but with a new philosophy that prioritized social impact as much as financial results. Helen consolidated the Digital Sunflowers program, now with expansion plans for other regions of the US. And Julia divided her time between school, where she increasingly excelled in science, and her role as child happiness specialist, inspiring new generations of children to see technology as a tool for transformation. One Sunday afternoon, while Helen prepared lunch and Julia was focused on a new science experiment in her room, Roderick went to the balcony of the penthouse, leaning on his cane. He now used only one, a significant progress in his recovery. There, among the sunflowers that had become a symbol of his personal transformation, he contemplated the city below. New York City remained chaotic and imperfect, with its stark contrasts and immense challenges. But now he saw it with different eyes, no longer as a distant backdrop for his individual successes, but as a living space where small actions could generate waves of transformation. "What are you thinking about?" Helen asked, approaching silently and hugging him from behind. "How life can change completely when we stop looking only at ourselves." At that moment, Julia joined them carrying a freshly picked sunflower. "Look, this one is special. It has a genetic mutation that makes the petals grow in a double spiral." Roderick took the flower, examining it with genuine interest. "Do you know what this reminds me of?" he asked. "The three of us. An improbable combination that resulted in something unique and special." Helen smiled, taking Julia's hand, and like the sunflowers, we continue together towards the light, no matter how cloudy the day. On that flowery balcony embraced under the Sunday sun, the three formed their own human sunflower, resilient, always seeking the light, transforming difficulties into growth and beauty, a living reminder that sometimes the most improbable encounters are the ones that have the power to make us walk again, not just with our feet, but especially with our hearts. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope that the journey of Roderick, Helen, and Julia has deeply touched your hearts. This story reminds us that true transformation often begins in the most unexpected encounters, and that all of us can walk on the inside again when we find our purpose. If you are moved by the digital sunflowers, be sure to subscribe to our channel to receive more narratives that explore the complexities and beauties of American life. Leave a like if this story resonated with you, and share in the comments which moment touched your heart the most. Like Julia's sunflowers, we are always seeking the light of your reactions to flourish even more. Until our next story!